because, sharing with my lovely friend Caitlin here this morning that, sometimes like Daryl will call me in the middle of the night or somebody else will call me in the middle of the night and I look at the phone and I'm like, I wait to see what text message follows to see, okay, Lord, do you really want me to answer this right now? Because I am really tired, And I'm like, okay, good, I can call back in the morning, and other times it's important, that you answer that call. But what do you do? What do you do? When work is service and service is work, I was thinking about, so many of us that come to this church, service is who we are. It's not just in our personal life, it's not just in our homes, it's not just for our kids, it's not just for, the 12-step fellowship, it's a nursing career, it's like, a personal care career, or, cleaning houses, or recovery coaching, whatever it is. Like so many of us, we live and work service, right? So what do? Right? Those times happen when we would rather do all kinds of things other than what we're supposed to do or what we're called to do. And I was thinking about this because for me, it's like because I've had this career, right, in home visiting and in supports, I've got all this education about service, right? And, was thinking about those times when I just don't feel like it. Like, I don't feel like it. I want to get out of bed. I don't want to listen to anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to sit on my couch, drink decaf coffee, and watch Chinese dramas for the day and do a Netflix binge thing, right? It's rare that I hit a wall like that, but it happens. So what do you do serving through seasons that seem without end? And I feel like this COVID thing has felt that way for me. Like it just seems like there's no end in sight. Every time we think we might be coming to the light at the end of the tunnel, a new variant pops up, staff gets hit with all kinds of COVID cases, people connected to you start passing away. It's like, how do you keep going when we're constantly asked to be overexerting ourselves and when it leads to exhaustion, Karen, who's a mentor in my life, she and I were talking through the stuff that's been going on with Daryl, and I was just telling her, like, I've got this deadline, I've got that deadline, I've got to get this in, I got to present here, I have to get this report in, early childhood, I got to get this grant in, and like going through the list of things, and she was like saying how, the strong women that I know do great until they don't. And she's like, when you hit a wall, it's usually because your personal life is falling apart at the same time your work life is falling apart. And I've been very fortunate, it seems like things don't tend to fall apart at the same time. It's just like a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, but it's this constant like putting out fires, putting out fires, putting out fires. And then some things do fall through the cracks. In my case, some big things. I missed a deadline. A while ago, I paid taxes twice on an IRA disbursement. I was supposed to like file a amendment, and I just found out that I timed out. And I'm like, you're kidding me right now. I just handed Joe Biden thousands of dollars. What? But then I think, well, if that's the worst that happens, I've spent probably more in my lifetime on coffee at Dunkin' Donuts than that, And like I have to talk myself sometimes into not being upset, realizing that God meets all of my needs, What am I gonna do, right? But what about these other times, when it's not really the overexertion that's the issue, but those times when we simply just don't feel like sacrificing, like we just don't feel like it. We just don't want to. We just are sick of somebody, or forget where they're coming from, and just like, I'm done with this kid, or some of the people in our lives that love to attack us. We know it's what's behind it. It's usually some mental health issues or some past trauma or something like that, and we're just like, I don't want to deal with it anymore. It's like we don't want to sacrifice our time, we don't want to sacrifice our efforts, we don't want to put our treasure where our heart is, because maybe our heart's not in it. What do we do? And I was thinking, on any given day, wouldn't you rather go to the beach? Wouldn't you rather be someplace warm when it's like 2 below and I mean, for me, I would rather be on my couch with the heat cranked up, but I was thinking, a lot of people are like, oh, let's go to the beach, And I do think that on any given day, some of us could choose to go to the movies, maybe take a shopping trip, get a pedicure. That was like a thing my daughter was into. Maybe just go for a walk, sit on a couch. That's me. or read a good book, or maybe fold a pile of neglected laundry, or scroll. I would never want to do laundry. I would never want to do laundry. But scroll Facebook for hours. I've been known to get sidetracked in my kitchen in the morning. I've got all this extra time to get a bunch of stuff done, and all of a sudden, I'm reading about, the glaciers melting in Iceland or something, and I have really no interest in that, but I just get sidetracked by something. But what we do, we all do, with our minutes, each day actually matters. I'm a member of a church and a ministry where I show up at least 6 days a week in some capacity, most often 7, and find many of you doing the same thing in some capacity. I feel like Joy does that, Yolanda does that, Harry, you probably do too, because if you're not working, you're doing something, for the fellowship or volunteering to do a transport, or, doing something, or doing stuff for the kids, we're constantly doing stuff, Barbara taking care of her brother, doing the pantry stuff, making sure everything's taken care of when Nancy's absent, we're all doing this stuff. And it can be exhausting at times. But thinking of burnout or being tired, being exhausted, this whole idea of self-care and the self-centeredness that sometimes that could promote, thinking how does that fit in with the Christian life? For me, as for many of us, going to work isn't really an option. It's either a necessity or a driven purpose. And that was something that I didn't realize not everybody lives with. I have had some discussions with somebody in my life that didn't understand how I could be completely escalated in a discussion that's pretty heated right before stepping into a service and then still give a good message. How do you do that? Well, because it's different. It's a responsibility, it's a driven purpose. I'm not going to not meet my responsibility in those times. And it was kind of shocking to me to find out how many people just pick up the phone and call in sick at the last minute and have no concern for what that impacts, as far as the rest of the day for everybody else. Like, it was shocking to me to learn that, And then realizing that when you live a purpose-driven life, for me, it feels like there is no choice, but there is always a choice. And for some people, they don't choose to show up, For those who work in the church and purpose-driven work, sometimes the difference between going to work and serving the body can get muddled. That's something else that I see. That sometimes, figuring out, what is God's purpose in something and what is the world's purpose, or, a secular purpose, and where is the division in that? And I think for the abiding Christian, there's not a lot of division, because you take Jesus with you wherever you go. It's part of your purpose. It's part of what drives you to do the things that you're called to do, including keeping responsibilities, This shades of gray can sometimes be a little bit stressful to navigate, because it's not that we serve two masters, it's like, how do we serve our master in a context of a framework in this world that we're called to also abide by authorities that we're under, and I've had a lot of conversations around this because there are Christians that work at the Resource Center, trying to figure out, how far can they push the gray, when they're looking to support somebody. For those who work in secular jobs, also serving, church people are serving, and every kind of job creates a need for rest, and sometimes we lose track of that. I think as servant people, sometimes taking care of ourselves is the last thing we do, and having healthy boundaries around that can sometimes be tough, because, there is that picture of Jesus, that, when he gets tired, he doesn't stop doing the work until the work is done, and then goes off to the mountain and spends time with God. And I think keeping that relationship is probably one of the biggest things for people who are busy doing the work that really shouldn't be sacrificed, and sometimes can get sacrificed. And I think that's when people start struggling with things like, where was Jesus in this, or having issues of doubt and things like that. So keeping that relationship is very important. But what do we do when being tired turns into not wanting to serve? Are you saying, I love my job, but in your heart ask the question, do I really anymore? Do I even mean that anymore? There have been times that I have felt that, and really getting honest in my prayer life is having that conversation with God, and coming to terms with things. Like even this morning I was thinking thinking, I said to Barbara, oh, it's a little discouraging when there's 3 people in church or 4 people in church. But then I thought to myself, is it really though? Is it really discouraging? Or is it just something I'm programmed to think because the world measures things in numbers? I'm not really all that discouraged. If anything, I feel pretty blessed that like this chaplain showed up, you know, with a Bible for Daryl, and he prays for the chaplain, and Daryl's filled, you know, with feeling that sense of purpose at a time when he's incredibly discouraged. And I'm like, that's my Jesus. He shows up when we need him, you know. Commands versus recommendations and interpretations. I was thinking about in the Bible, there's a lot of things that we read, and sometimes we read them and we don't know if it's like, oh, you need to do this, or if it's like, oh, you should do this, or, oh, you know, maybe we could interpret it one way or the other way, you know. But when members of the body of church neglect to serve in varying capacities with varying gifts, the church stops functioning well. And I was thinking about that. We miss people when they don't show up in this church because we're so small. And, you know, Paul's away, and now Joyce, you know, filling in a couple of places when she's already doing so much. It makes it hard. You know, Nancy's away, and, you know, Barbara's like my go-to person in the pantry. I mean, I try not to put that on you. but I think to myself, I know if Barbara's there, I'm not worried while I'm at work, you know, or if Joy's doing intakes, I'm not worried that things are going awry, you know. And like I've got no problem weighing food and putting it into the pantry on Sunday mornings, thinking if I do it, then Barbara doesn't have to, because Barbara's already picking up stuff over here, you know. It's just thinking about how churches can't function if people aren't being the hands and feet, you know. Every Christian is called to serve Christ by serving the church, and that's right from the scriptures. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. And I was thinking about this and talking with Daryl about it, that, you know, I had all these good plans of like having this guiding coalition to really start moving the church forward. And we had that annual meeting, and there was like 40 people there, and Yolanda volunteered to be the church secretary. And like, I was like, oh, we're starting to get a good foundation here. And then Corona hit, and our numbers dwindled, and the house went away, and you know, we miss Anthony and Eddie and some of these guys that got dispersed out of the areas. And, you know, thankfully we've seen them, and we know they're doing okay. Eddie's managing a house down in Manchester, helped us move some furniture into somebody's home that was just moving into an apartment a couple weeks ago. And I just realized that, yeah, we're a small little group, but we've had a big impact on different people. And now they're out doing stuff in other places, you know. It's neat to see that kind of service, but it's also important that we keep going, you know, even when we're small, even when we're tired, even though it's hard some days. When we don't feel like serving, we need to remember and dwell on key truths from God's Word. And this is where I was thinking about what is commandment, what is recommendation type of thing. So that word dwell, that was from the Bible, is this idea of really like spending some time with God and thinking about some of his principles. So when you're ready to hit a wall and you're like just tired and you need rest, go to bed. But think about what God says about who you are, you know, wonderfully made, you know, that you're held in the palm of his hand, that he'll raise you up on eagle's wings. You know, like think about those things in his word, ponder them, you know, reflect on them and remember. And then focus on that stuff, because if you focus on the stuff that got you feeling exhausted, you just feel more exhausted. Directing our faith in a positive direction is a choice. You know, we can dwell on the negative stuff so easily, and our mind almost always goes there. I mean, I do it to myself. I mean, Joy and I get evaluations done when we do training, and we see all these wonderful things that people say about us, but what do we remember? That one person that said they didn't like this or they didn't like that, you know? We tend to focus on the negative sometimes. And we need to remember to see ourselves through God's lens, you know, that we're wonderfully made, you know, that we're made in his image. So directing that thoughts in a negative direction can lead to bad things, but really what the Bible tells us to do is to renew our minds. Dwelling on what is right and good takes a conscious choice to do this, especially when we're tired. Because when we're tired, we tend to go down the wrong road. The gatekeeper of my mouth doesn't work so well. Yeah, I say things I regret, you know, and sometimes get myself into trouble, you know, and then I don't like who I become sometimes in those moments. 1 Peter chapter 4, God tells Christians that we are to love one another deeply, open our homes and give of our possessions without being stingy or miserly, and serve faithfully with what God has given us. He never says to serve only when we feel like it or when it's super convenient for us. He doesn't say serve because no one else is available. You're the only one who can, or because the recognition you might get. God says to serve because loving the church is a natural outflow of loving Him. It's what Jesus Himself came to do on earth. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give His life as a ransom for many, from the Gospel of Mark. And this is from 1 Peter. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. To Him be the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. Not us. You know? I think, you know, imagine if, like, we guarded our mouths to the point as if everything we spoke was coming from God Himself. I would be a lot nicer than my husband sometimes, you know? Or even my kids, you know, thinking about that. Sometimes my staff, you know, the people I work with, my teammates, you know, yeah, there's just so many things that I think, oh, I don't do good in this. Help me do better. You know, Daryl prays it all the time. More of you, Jesus, less of me. You know. Romans 7:6 says, "But now, by dying to what once bound us, we have been released from the law, so that we serve in a new way of the Spirit, and not in the old way of the written code." So remember how to serve. We don't serve out of an obligation to fulfill the law anymore, though sometimes we feel the weight of obligation, I would say. But that weight should be because we serve out of affection for Jesus. You know, it's because I love Him. Sometimes it's that feeling of I don't want to disappoint my daddy. You know, I definitely grew up with that kind of feeling with my father. But it really should be because He fulfilled the law for us. I mean, He went to the cross for us. He died for us. He set us this incredible example of like a role model. So we should be serving with that humble thanksgiving because Christ's ultimate sacrifice. But sometimes we forget. We forget in the moment. We forget because we're frustrated. We forget because it's cold and somebody left all the tools on the back porch and the snow got all over them, and you're bringing them in, and now you're spending a half a day cleaning backpack blowers and table saws and whatever in your house because that's the only place the snow's going to melt, you know? And you get frustrated, but then you think, well, okay, if I don't do it, who will? Sometimes I do think that way. And ultimately, what is the goal, you know? And it's like, okay, take my heart from this resentment and turn it into the love that I should have, you know? So sometimes we have to pray through those moments even. And we should remember that serving is a privilege. And I do kind of hammer people with this sometimes that, you know, it's a privilege to be invited into people's lives, especially when they're a mess. Because when people are having trouble in life, that's when they don't want to share what's really going on. You know, that life is hard and they've made mistakes and they're not living up to their own ideals and their own vision of what they should be. When we faithfully serve God with our physical beings, it really should be because we first served Him with our heart. You know, that the will, the mind, the soul, the physical body, everything follows that. You know, where is your heart? This is an expectation we should have of ourselves and all Christians. From Joshua 22, "But be very careful to keep the commandment and the law that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you, to love the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to Him, to keep His commands, to hold fast to Him, and to serve Him with all your heart and with all your soul." You know, sometimes I think easier said than done. But we can make the choice. We can make the choice. You remember, human emotions are fallible. They're fallible. But God's word isn't. So if we make the choice, even when we don't feel like it, we can't go wrong. Our gifts of service are not individually all that special because they really don't belong to us. I mean, that's another thing that I think, you know, I have a firm understanding that I'm not gifted in all areas, you know? And so that humility keeps me, you know, seeking out people more talented than me for a lot of different things. Because I do have a lot of gifts, but they're borrowed. They're not derived from me, but they're God-given. And they change over time. and I found it's very much been according to what the need in front of me has been when there's been no one else. I mean, it's not been about me as much as maybe the person in front of me and the project ahead of me. They're God-given. They're borrowed. It's like the glory doesn't belong to me, it belongs to him. 1 Corinthians 4:7 says, "For who makes you different from anyone else? What do you have that you did not receive? And if you did receive it, why do you boast as though you did not?" If we're created by God, he's given us those gifts and talents. They don't belong to us. God therefore gives us gifts and allows us to be part of what he's doing so that we can enjoy his greatness. Acts chapter 20 says, "In everything I did, I showed you that by this kind of hard work we must help the weak, remembering the words the Lord Jesus himself said, 'It is more blessed to give than to receive.'" When I don't feel like serving, I must remember the gift that service is to the giver and not just the receiver. And it's easy to kind of look back now and see some of the fruits of my labor from like 10, 20 years ago because I've been doing this work for a long time. But it's not like I was seeing any of this happening in the past. It's just that steadiness, that consistent growth that comes from abiding in Christ and continuing on this path we call life. So remember the gospel. Romans says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship." Paul shows, when you understand the mercy and love of God, the natural response will be to offer your body as a living sacrifice that's holy and pleasing to him. Now, do I feel holy? No. Not in the sense of, I'm so pious and I'm so good. Not like that. But holy, the word itself really means set apart. It's set apart. Do I feel set apart? I absolutely do. And it's not because of me, it's because of what he has either done through me, around me, for me, with the people that I care about, through prayer, through hearing things like Shari, recovering from when we really thought she had one foot in the grave, right? I mean, it's just kind of the miraculous things. Or hearing somebody talk about their recovery and say, "Oh, when I was active, Jesus was right there with me the whole time, and I know he's the one who got me through it." Hearing those kind of things light my soul up, because it tells me that we have a purpose here, even if there's only a handful of us here, that we are making a difference as the hand and feet of Jesus in this community, even if there's just a handful of us, So do I really feel discouraged? Not really, but sometimes I have to talk myself into not focusing on that because the world will tell me different. When we have an affection for God, we will serve others in light of who God is, not because anyone else deserves it, or because we're looking for our own accolades, or because we're counting numbers in the church pews, or any of that. We remember that when we dwell on his word, when we dwell on who he is, upon his mercy, that affection for him grows. Because then I start thinking it's miraculous that we have heat in this building. With a handful of us. It's a miracle that our bills are paid, with so few people coming, Not only that, if we gaze on the mercy of God, we will freely give it to those who don't deserve our service to them. I think of the people that have attacked us over the years, that we've provided food and furniture and TVs and sofas and all of this stuff over the years that come back and say all kinds of things, that have done damage even to the body over time. And I don't have any, it's hard to explain, but I never have hatred in my heart. I always feel like that southern saying of, "Oh, God bless their heart," kind of comes to mind, because then I remember the trauma they've been through, or some of the things that have happened in the past that causes people to come from that place of hurt, and try to, I don't want to say justify bad behavior, but accept that it is what it is. My job is not to react to that, but to react to the love of God and the fact that his affection for me is just as great as that person across the table who's trying to hurt me. So what do I do with that? I love him anyways. Galatians 5:13 says, "You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh, rather serve one another humbly in love." So indulging the flesh for me would sometimes be, "Oh, I want to react to that guy's comment on Facebook so bad." That would be my flesh, Somebody's blasting us again because I bought Shoji screens. Are you kidding me? They were the cheapest alternative to curtains that we put up in the Franklin Center. But yeah, we spent our money. We have to have privacy in our offices, you know? Oh, I want to talk back to that person so bad on Facebook, you know? But I don't do it. And then I remind myself, even having those feelings, I got to get my prayer time with God a little bit stronger so that I don't even go there, you know? That the filter maybe works a little bit sooner in me than getting there, you know? Remember why you are serving. Galatians chapter 2, I've been crucified with Christ and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not set aside the grace of God, for if righteousness can be gained through law, Christ died for nothing. So even if we get disgruntled, irritated, frustrated, complaining about serving, then we are probably serving for the wrong reasons and really should take stock of our motives. So it's like taking that step back and re-examining and getting back with Jesus and spending some time in prayer, meditating, dwelling, thinking, pondering, all of that on his word to kind of get our hearts back in a better place. In Philippians, Paul praises the service of Timothy by contrasting him against others who serve. I have no one else like him who will show genuine concern for your welfare. For everyone looks out for their own interests, not for those of Jesus Christ. And I was thinking about that. When we stop thinking about our self-care by not doing stuff that we're called to do, is it really about caring for ourselves or is it really caring for our own interests? Like we have to kind of look at that and examine that. We serve because God tells us to worship him this way, not because we want people to know how awesome our gifts are. We serve because Jesus is our role model, not because it's easy. And we serve with God's strength, not with our own finite abilities. Philippians says, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. But it's really about him giving us the gifts that we have and using the gifts and talents that we have to serve. If we aren't serving out of an overflow of worshipful hearts, we will miss out on opportunities to love like Jesus. We'll trip over people. We serve like Jesus even when we don't feel like it by looking to Jesus and reminding ourselves who he is and what he did for us. And who do we see ourselves considering it all? You know, I use this thing in pretty much everything that I do, that I measure things, I monitor things, I adjust for things to control better outcomes. You know, ultimately it's his control, you know. The why, the where, the how, you know, of what we're doing matters, because not all good ideas are God ideas. So it's paying attention. Am I serving to build up myself, or is it truly an act of worship? You know, what's in it for me is what the world will say. But do we ask ourselves, what's in it for God? Do I serve so that I can take the credit, so I can look good, get those accolades? Or do I serve in order to point to God's goodness, his glory, out of love for him? You know, for me, measuring that stuff is a constant. You know, because we know that appearances can impact people accessing the church. You know, I was thinking about this because I had read an article about the wounds that pastors carry. And this chaplain that I know, Shirley Marcroft, had shared it, and so like I was reading through it, and I was like, oh yeah, this has happened to me, this has happened to me, this has happened to me, going through it all. And I was thinking about how I don't dwell on that stuff. If I did, I think I wouldn't be here, you know? Because it's too easy to have excuses to make life easy for ourselves. Do I think people take advantage of my gifts and get caught up in resentment instead of remembering that my gifts belong to God alone? You know? So I think when I start building resentments, I have to go back and again look at where this is coming from. You know, what is this about? Do I consider how Jesus chose to serve on earth? What we ponder on, focus on, meditate on, measure, that's the stuff that will grow. So we need to grow the good stuff. You know, there's a Native American poem about the two wolves that live within. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but it talks about the good one and like the bad one. And the child asks the grandfather which one is Rose, and he says the one that you feed. You know, so we have a choice in every moment, really. When we start going down a road, when we get into a fight with with a sibling or our loved ones, to step back and feed the good wolf, not the bad one. So grow the good stuff. Grow the good stuff and serve when you don't feel like it. Do it anyhow. And focus on the good stuff of God.